Welcome to the Leader to Leader podcast. I'm your host, Susan Spears. Our guests today are Veronica Curry. She is the Director for Equity Advancement at Germanna Community College here in the Fredericksburg, Virginia region. Veronica, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here, Susan.
Yes, and joining Veronica is Matt Rothe, who is the pastor for the Way Church here in the Fredericksburg, Virginia region. Matt, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Susan. Veronica, good to be here with you.
Same here.
Yeah, so we've got the three of us here today because we were both, or all three of us rather, were all involved in a big community event here a couple of weeks ago. We're sitting down towards the end of October of 2022, and we came together on October 13th when we hosted Chris Singleton. Now, for our listeners that this may be the first time you're listening to the Leader to Leader podcast, you can go back a couple of episodes and you'll see where I did record an interview with Chris Singleton, and you can find out more about him. But he was our keynote speaker for a leadership summit that we planned along with some other alumni members of Leadership Fredericksburg here in our community. We worked on this really all year in 2022. And through the course of that, as we decided how we wanted to have this dialogue at this wonderful event, these two wonderful leaders, Veronica and Matt, really stood out to me as folks I thought, this is the team I want to do the middle section of the day. So let me tee this up for our listeners. In the morning, we had Chris come in, and Chris has a very compelling story. Please do listen to him if you can. He shares all about communities coming together, working together, seeing past things that tear us apart, and finding your way to love, and always choosing love over hate. It was a very powerful message. He's a dynamic young man. He's only 26, and we had a great time with him. Veronica and Matt are both community leaders that do a lot in the community, and over here at the Chamber, they're involved with Leadership Fredericksburg. I asked them if they would be co-facilitators for the afternoon dialogue where we convened our community to discuss outcomes from listening to Chris's talk in the morning. And they both kindly said yes, and they started working together, and they created this great program for the afternoon, and you guys were both just amazing. So I want to just go ahead and stop letting our listeners hear my voice now and move right to both of you and hear about your thoughts about your takeaways from the event and working together and that part of our community right now.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. And before we get into maybe our personal takeaways, I'll just step back and say thank you for the honor to get to be a part of an event like this. I'm just so grateful that you, Susan, and our entire chamber have a vision for our community that revolves around very important, very serious, very influential topics like unity, like coming together, like forgiveness, like overcoming any divisiveness, whether it's around race, age, gender, economics, education, and just creating a wonderful space for us to get to have these important dialogue about this. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
My thanks as well, Susan. When I think about the event, I am thinking about the word wow. Chris really wowed me personally, and I know from feedback that we've received from the audience and feedback that I heard personally that day, and just the faces, the looks on everybody's faces and how engaged they were, I know that he wowed the entire crowd.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I said to you, both of you, I think, that we prepared a lot for this event, did we? Including listening to Chris's talks in the past,
we did.
Reading about him. And so I was like expecting, maybe to a certain degree, that I've heard everything or I've already been wowed by Chris. But seeing it in person, you're right, Veronica, I was wowed.
Yeah, such a powerhouse. And one of my biggest takeaways is just his demonstration through his speech and through his actions and his entire demeanor of love, of what he talks about, love. And there is so much division in this world today that it's just nice to see and nice to hear. And Chris was such a wonderful example of that. And not only while he's on stage speaking, but just in how he has lived his life since that horrible, tragic incident with his mother. He's been a wonderful example of love and taking such a horrible situation and making good out of it.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think we'll get into a lot of different specific points that Chris brought up, but it is really wise to stop and look at, I'll say subliminal, but it's hardly subliminal because it is in your face to see just the overwhelming, I'll describe, attitude of leadership that he has, that he brings. That's really what's inspiring. A lot of these other points we'll bring up about dealing with heartache and tragedy, about dealing with forgiveness, that's important. We'll key on that. But just to stop and say, whoa, the tone that we're doing this with, that's a game changer.
Oh, yes. And I know he shared with all of us and nationwide his age. And someone in the audience said this, and I agree. He's such an old soul. Even though he's a very young man, he's lived through a lot already. And it's made him wiser and better for it. So much maturity that he demonstrated that day. And as you listen to his podcast, just his presence is such an old soul and full of maturity and wisdom that he shared with us as well.
Yeah, leadership presence is such an important component. You know, I didn't know what to expect, and I remember as he came down the hallway here, and I saw, I don't know that I thought he was short, but he was certainly tall, right, Matt? When we met him here for the podcast, and then he just had just such a warm, I guess is a good word, a warm presence, and just incredible. And the way that he's looking at the areas of his life already and being so intentional about how he wants to give back to his community, he wants to serve his family, he has specific goals. I think all of those things are really inspiring for others to hear, no matter what age we are, to go, wow, I mean, you've really got it together. I did not have all those goals down when I was 26 years old. I'm going to admit that right now. But to hear them really is a great way to look at the world. And then, of course, his foundations in faith were really important to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And Susan, you're picking up on a big part of our conversation on the podcast that you had with Chris. So I'd encourage any people listening to this, if they haven't, to go back and listen to that as well.
Yeah. Well, so you guys are both seasoned leaders. We may be different ages, the three of us, and we all three look different. So that's another great thing about bringing us together. Just in this room, the three of us represent diversity, but yet we have such a coming together of the minds.
Absolutely.
You know, and we're all leadership junkies. So this summit was around that topic, leadership. It's a leadership summit, and leaders lead in the community. That's the idea of pulling all that together. Sometimes a leadership summit is all around professional development. This time it was around community impact, you know, and that component of leadership. So what are some of your thoughts around that and the transformational part of what we're trying to do here with this discussion?
Well, first of all, I took away a lot of what he said. So it wasn't go to a session and listen to a speaker and call it a day. I took away a lot. And the interesting thing is there were two people really more than two, that were at the session that day that I saw in subsequent meetings right after that. One of them attended a session at Germanna, and they were talking about it as well. And there were some things that we all spoke about that we could carry with us in our daily lives as leaders. Just about, first of all, pausing when things happen to us. When someone says something that we may not quite agree with it, how do we react? When we're working with someone that's very different than we are, different in thought and perspectives, how do we react? He reminded me of some of those things that we can all be an example of in our community. And those two people that I saw later were talking about how they were able to continue to think about those concepts that Chris shared and carry them through in their daily work and in their community. It was before them in their mind, thinking about, now, let me pause. Let me think about how I can react in this particular situation.
That's really good, Veronica. And I'm not going to say anything different than what you just said, but maybe attach it to something Chris said. My favorite maybe mantra or point that he brought up was his idea that there's a story behind every stance. And the reason why that resonated with me so much is because it makes you stop. Because here's what happens when you believe that there is a story behind everybody's stance. It does two things. First, it puts you in a posture of humility. That if I believe you have a story to tell, that automatically means Matt doesn't know everything. And so I have to, in a real sense and in a real posture of humility, now come into this engagement or this conversation or this relationship from a place of humility, that I have something to learn.
That's right.
And it could just be your experience. And I love that because it makes you slow down. So it puts you in a posture of humility, and it automatically humanizes whomever it is that you're talking to. And so this idea that we so easily associate people with, we reduce them to ideas or to their skin color or to their age, like automatically. That's maybe unfortunately human to do that, and it's increasingly been a topic of conversation in our culture. But what it does, when I think, okay, there's a story behind your stance, behind whatever you just said, I now humanize you and go, okay, you're not different. You're not someone who is, I'm not demonizing you. I'm humanizing you to hear about what it is that you and I share in common, or where we can meet. And that to me is so impactful.
Yeah, and there's so much we have in common. We often think, because of the division, we think we're so different, but there is a lot that we have in common with others. And that pause, that's one of the words beyond wow that I've just been thinking about a lot after hearing Chris. Just pause and think, yes, what's behind that story? What's behind what that person is saying, or how they're reacting to me, or how they're reacting to others? What's behind it? Just taking a minute and giving them that voice and listening to them. And it's amazing what you learn and how that humbles us.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be always in their grand, like Chris told his, I'll describe it as his life narrative, right? And he has a really compelling one because of the tragedy that struck in his hometown and his mother being taken by racially motivated murder. That is a grand narrative. And maybe there are times and places where we stop and I learn Veronica's life narrative. But it could be as simple as, okay, I'm just going to stop right here. Why did you say that or decide that? And it could apply in the micro and the macro as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and think about it. Like when Chris walks in the room, okay, everybody knew who he was that arrived there, pretty much everybody. If they didn't, we're going to share this little video. We're going to give you a clip. We're going to tell you about it. And as he said, most people don't share their pain. So sometimes, somebody that's acting out a certain way or something's going on, there's pain, there's other stories behind it. And if we just pause to listen or show some empathy, we can help them through that and get to the other side, right?
Oh, yeah, that's so good, because what you're asking is, am I approaching this, whether it's as a leader, whether it's somebody who's interested in justice in our community, am I approaching it from a compassionate, loving standpoint, or am I approaching this from a suspicion and division and different standpoint? Those are two massively different angles to approach it at, and Chris gave us a prime example and taught us. Can I say that?
Yes,
he taught us what it really looks like to come at it from an angle of love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm. This sounds corny. I love that love is on our mind. That we're talking about love. It's just it's one of my values, right? And so I think that's why I've been attracted to Chris's story for so long. I've followed him since 2015 when the incident happened in Charleston. And when I saw that he became a speaker, I wanted to follow that story and see how that was going and bring him here. So knowing that we had about 100 students in the room that were from area around middle school, high school aged students, knowing that made a difference, I think, for them as well is really important, because I think so much of the narrative out here in our society is about dividing people. And another thing Chris said, you focus on the hate instead of the love. Like if you think of your sports team, what team do I hate? I hate them more than I love my team. And traditionally, it's been the other way around. There've been rivalries, and that's fun. But really, your focus is like you've got your Green Bay Packers. I've got my Patriots. We both are having a bad year, my friend.
Yes.
But anyway, it'll get better. Will it get better? I don't know. But I digress. But I love the Patriots. You love the Packers. We don't walk around hating the other team. We love our team first. And our society these days is spending more time, it seems, focused on that anger and divisiveness. So taking a step away from that, I think, is really important for leaders.
Yeah, I think, it's important as leaders because obviously we fault mass media all the time, right? When we have these conversations, I think, and we say, oh, that sells. That's why division is so popular. Well, it also is like drama that's interesting to humans. And so, we can do that even in our own worlds as leaders. And so to instead stop and say, wait, what does it look like to instead you cheer for your team, me cheer for mine. And yeah, we're going to have a rivalry, but I'm not knocking you as my first reaction.
Yeah, finding the space to support each other.
That's right. And love is an action word. So many people say, I love you, or I love that person. And what does it really mean? And that's one of the things that I really got from Chris. He talks love, but he walks love as well. So when we talk about, I love this particular team, or I love this person, or I love this, what's behind it? And if we say we love others, or we're going to show others that we love them, what are we doing? It's an action word. And there should be something that we're doing on a consistent basis to show that we really do care. And that's what I think about when I think of love in the community. I had a personal example I want to share. This person that I worked with some years ago, I tell you, if she said black, I said white. If I said white, she said black. If I said up, she said down. We were just very, very, very opposite. And it just caused a lot of heartache on the job, a colleague of mine. And more as time went on, I just thought, this person, I don't know what it is, but I saw hate in my mind more than love in my mind. And years went on and never heard from this person. She ended up getting another job. And then all of a sudden I get this message from her. She looked me up, found out where I was working. We were still with the same company, but we had about 4 or 5 different jobs since then, and tracked me down and said, I just want to apologize to you. I know that we were so opposites and there was so much division between us, and I think I hated you at the time, and I'm sure you practically hated me. And she said, there was so much going on in my life at the time, and shared with me some of the things that were going on. And she said that was driving me. That was causing me to act the way I was acting. And I thought about that situation, and we had a very good conversation, stayed in touch, and it was a very humbling experience because I thought about there were probably some things I could have done then had I really paused, had I really shown her love versus focused on, oh my gosh, she doesn't agree with this, and I think we should be doing this. I believe this, and she believes that. Instead of focusing on those opposite things and focusing on those differences, but to really focus on the love. And there were probably so many actions I could have taken at the time. Good news is it ended well, and she got in touch. She took the initiative. She put some action behind it and got in touch and made a good connection.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a tremendous story. And you said at the time there was things you could have done, but also you said it's a good ending because you forgave. And that is a major theme that Chris brought out because he talks very openly about his forgiveness of the person who took his mother's life. And he also talks about what's on the other side of forgiveness for him. And put that into maybe context for our listeners in your story. What was on the other side of forgiveness for you?
Just hearing her out. Just hearing her out and her story and what was going on, and also thinking about me. What could I have done differently during that time? And even though a lot had passed, but thinking about, well, thank goodness, I'm so grateful she cared enough to reach out to me and for us to mend our ways and understand that, yes, we did have a lot of differences, but also there was something going on at the time with her that caused a lot of negativity in how she was treating others and reacting with others is something she shared with me. So yeah, just humbling myself to listen to her and meet her halfway and forgive, and for her to forgive me as well.
Yeah, that's powerful, because what's on the other side of forgiveness? That's Chris's phrase, and I think it really does well to put in concrete terms a very abstract, at times, topic of forgiveness, right? And oftentimes we think that when we forgive somebody, that we're doing something for them, or we are pardoning their transgression in some way, right? But there's so much that it does for us. And it gives us freedom. It gives us release from maybe resentment or bitterness. That's a heavy theme that Chris said could have changed the trajectory of my life if I held on to those things instead of forgive. But instead, he says he gets to wake up every day and think about a purpose of unity, because, man, he's free from that.
That's right.
That is really encouraging.
You guys bring to mind, this is a little different, but a year or so ago on Facebook, I got a private message from somebody I think I went to high school with. And she said, "Hi, I just wanted to reach out and apologize to you for being mean to you when we were in, I don't know, 9th grade or something. I'm sorry I was that way. I was wrong, and I hope you'll forgive me." Something along those lines. And I'm looking at it. I'm going, who is this? And you pull up the name because we're not connected. I look connected to all these high school people. To this day, I don't know who this person is. I don't remember it. I'm sure that there is something there that she probably, it was a year older or something, and had made me feel bad at that time or something. But fortunately, I didn't carry that or even remember it to even remember who she was. So I wrote her back and said, "Please let your heart be, at ease. I'm good, and honestly don't remember what it is that happened there." But something was happening in her mind, I guess, when she came across my name and thought, I need to reach out. I've been maybe carrying that for all this time, and here I was walking around in the world not worried about it. But I continue to think about that, and that how I wrote her back with kindness, and I thanked her for thinking about me, and just said, yeah, there's really nothing to forgive because it's in the past, but there is probably a lot of release and something that she felt, right, from that.
Absolutely. Think of the weight that even Chris would be carrying today if he took another approach, if he did not take the kindness and the love approach, if he did not use this particular situation in a positive way. Mm-hmm. Think about the weight that would be on him. And I'm sure he'll never forget what happened. Yeah. Never forget it. But he's used it in such a positive way.
Yeah, and so that one's kind of a light one that I shared, but we could apply it to our families or other colleagues and stuff in different situations that we do carry when things don't end well. And if there's an opportunity to fix that, I think we should take it.
We should, yes.
And what you guys are talking about is these really personal stories that I'm glad you guys are sharing, and we're reflecting on Chris's very personal story too. And I think with all of those, yes, it helps in that instance, but to bring it to what you began with is how Chris shows up as a leader in just his posture and in all of the ways he acts, as do you. And so it's awesome to see how no, that doesn't only affect one relationship or one incident that happened years ago. No, it really transcends into how you show up as a leader in every aspect of your life.
Thank you for that. So, my friends, what do we do next? What are some of our ideas, how we can carry forward this good momentum and even on our day-to-day, but what are our thoughts around that, on next steps in our lives and the lives around us?
Well, I think we should take the time and the effort to get to know others, and not just others that we see and interact with on a regular basis, but others outside of our circle, and really get to know people. Life is full of meetings and Zoom calls and busy doing this and busy doing that, going to and fro. And I think it's so important. And I think, Matt, you shared a little of this about the value of taking time with people. And we often don't do that. Just take the time to spend with people and hear them out and not worried about checking something off of our list, but really getting to know others. And when you listen to people, when you spend time and listen, you really can learn a lot. And sometimes you're not doing it with the intention to learn a lot. You learn a lot by getting to know others. So I think that's one of the first things we can do.
You talked about intentions, and you also talked about meetings. And I don't know about y'all, but like most of the meetings and the Zoom calls that I have, it's for a purpose. It's for a goal. And we got to get to that purpose and that goal so we can move forward in our different organizations, right? How about we like start scheduling some where I just go, I'm just here to learn and to love. And there's really, if nothing else comes out of it, like, you know, I enjoyed listening and having coffee with you. You know, like, that's one of my takeaways. I thought about 3 different people that I know whom I care about, but I haven't spoken to in a long time just because I don't know what we talk about. Or, hey, I think we might disagree about this. But I'm like, you know what? Maybe just connecting with them would help them, or more likely help me in a lot of the different areas that I leave, even if it has no tangible benefit here at the end of our meeting.
Yeah, I think you should think about that, Matt. And if they've popped up in your mind, that means it's time.
It means something, yes.
It means it's time to reach out to them. It's so funny you said that. In the past 2 weeks, I heard from a lady that I worked in retail with at 2 different jobs, probably for a total of around 8 years at the 2 different places. Haven't seen her in more than 10 years. And she sent me a text message out of the blue the other day. Hey, do you remember me? You know what I wrote back to her? I wrote back in all caps. She had this long message about wanting to see if she could connect. I wrote back, I love you. Because I do. I love her. Kimberly, I know you're not listening, but I love you. And then, you know, we're going to get together after all this time. You know, we worked together in the 90s and the early 2000s. I heard from her. I heard from my college roommate, and we got together and spent about 4 hours together the other day, really just being together again after a long time. That was important, you know. And then I also heard from another lady I know from my retail years in high school who sent me a text, and she said, oh, my God, Susan, I just heard our other friend had passed away 6 months ago. And she said, I need to do a better job of us staying connected and getting together. And she said, I didn't even, you know, et cetera. And I thought, that was my regret, too, when this friend, Cindy, passed, that I hadn't seen Cindy since COVID. You know, so I hadn't had a chance to have, to remind her that I loved her and all that. So when they come to your mind, even if it's a little note, maybe it doesn't make it all the way to all those meetings, but to just check in. We don't know where those things will lead, but they continue to lead down paths of engagement, right, and make a difference in lives.
Absolutely. Those connections matter. They make a big difference. In fact, coming here in my car, I had been thinking about a colleague that I worked with and hadn't seen in a long time. And we used to connect quite a bit on the phone, and this was the second time she came to mind. So I said, let me just call her from the car. And sure enough, I got her, and we had the best conversation. And so I'm working to be more intentional about not putting that to the side, but doing something about it right then. Again, love is an action word. It really is. There's action behind love. So if you tell somebody you love them and you care about them, when was the last time you heard from them? And or when they come to your mind, what are we doing about it? Are we connecting with them? And also related to those connections, not just the people we know, but those that we don't. And I was sharing at one of the breakout tables during the session, there was a conversation about, oh, this group bothers me and I don't know how to handle it, one of the people at the table was saying. And a personal example of that is somebody that I don't know very well at work. Every time this person says something, I'm just like, oh, what do they mean by that? But I never ask them. And so it is my intention to ask them more when I'm with them and they say something that I don't understand. Instead of building a perception in my mind about what that means and what they said and why they said it, ask them and have a conversation with them.
Yeah, and theme that tied together your asking and just love being in action. I think about the intentionality, and I know one of the groups that brought it up. It's just really important to realize that this stuff doesn't happen by accident. I think we drift apart. That happens by accident. And yet we're talking to a group of leaders, right? That's who's listening to this podcast. That's who was at the event too. It takes making that leadership choice to be intentional about loving or listening or showing up or reaching out. It has to start somewhere, and that is just really that emphasis was reminded of to me that we have that responsibility, and it's a joy, it's a privilege.
It's so great to work with you guys.
Same here, Susan.
Oh, this is so much fun. We are already where we need to start to wind down, and I say we come back together and do another recording together. What do you guys think?
That'd be fun.
Are we
Great
good?
idea.
Okay,
Yes.
we're golden
You got
on
it.
that. But before we do that, and before we end it, I would just want to ask each of you to share any other thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Just that there's so much that we can do as leaders in our community, in our homes, and I just encourage us to do that. And when I say us, I mean myself as well, to do those things, to take those little steps to build a bridge between all of the division, because there's just so much of it going on in the world today that I think we can influence in a very positive way.
A lot of our conversation today centered around personal relationships and personal action steps that we can take. I also was incredibly encouraged by some of the organizational steps that I heard about going on already when we got together a couple weeks ago at the summit. I go, wow, this organization's doing that. Wow, this organization's doing that. And I didn't know that. And so maybe an encouragement to, while we also have the opportunity to do that in our personal lives and our personal leadership, I also think it's worth just mentioning and stating clearly that there are so many groups in our community that are already doing really good things.
Yes.
And it's just really wonderful to maybe stop and think like, oh, I could partner with them, or I could just go to their event and get to do these things that we're talking about there, because the opportunities are there. The Chamber of Commerce created a wonderful one with this summit event, but there's other groups too that were all a part of this chamber event that are doing them, and I'm excited to learn about them, go to them, attend them, and get to put this stuff into practice.
Yeah, you can hear the excitement and these two wonderful leaders right here with us. Both graduates of Leadership Fredericksburg and very engaged in our community. It's an honor to work with you in our community, and I look forward to us doing many more great things in the future. Our guests today on the Leader to Leader podcast have been Veronica Curry. She is the Director for Equity Advancement at Germanna Community College, and Matt Rothe, who is the pastor for the Way Church, both located here in the Fredericksburg, Virginia region. And I am your host, Susan Spears, with the Leader to Leader podcast. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.